Inshallah, we will start again. Sorry, we were having some technical difficulties. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for giving us an opportunity to resume our dars. And inshallah, today we will go over the 5th dars. But before we do so, as usual, we will go over the details of the last dars, a recap of the last dars. Last week, we went over a lot of very important points of this dars. And we started out last week with the type of heirs that are rightful of receiving a share. We began with primary heirs or ashabul furud, those heirs whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has granted a share for in the Qur'an. And we went over the details of those, and we mentioned the 12 types of ashabul furud or primary heirs. There were 4 males and 8 females. And then the second type of heirs that we went over were the secondary or the residuary heirs, known as asaba. We did not go over the list of asaba yet. Inshallah, that will come at a later time. But all we know so far is that they are rightful of receiving a share after all of the primary heirs or the applicable primary heirs receive their allotted share. And then the second stage will be the residuary or the secondary heirs. They will go on to receive. And then the third type of heir that we went over were tertiary heirs, or known as dawil arham. Those, they're so far in the distribution process that some even consider them as non-recipients, because they're so far and from cases to cases, from one family to another in the distribution process, it doesn't even get that far that the dawil arham is covered. Then following the types of heirs, we went over how to determine a share. So those shares that are mentioned in the Qur'an, the 1/2, 1/4, and 1/8, 2/3, 1/3, and 1/6. We went over the concept of dividing them into 2 groups and then seeing if from the group 1/2, mixes with all or one of from group 2, meaning the 2/3, 1/3, and 1/6, then the masla or the total amount of shares will be from 6. And following that, if rubu', if 1/4, mixes or clashes with 2/3, 1/3, or 1/6 from group number 2, or all of them from it, then the share will be, total amount of shares will be 12. And similarly, 1/8, if it does that, mixes or clashes with one or all from group 2, meaning 2/3, 1/3, and 1/6, then the total amount of shares will be 24. So we went over the details of that. And then following that, finding the base number, we went over the 4 relations to find a base number. And the 4 relations were tamathul, tadakhul, tawafuq, and the tabayun. So we went over the details of that as well. So in case of, so for tamathul, like we went over 1/6 and 1/6. So the base number will be any number. It could be the first 6 or it could be the second. So tamathul was basically this relation exists when 2 denominators are identical to each other, as I just mentioned, like 1/6 and 1/6. And tadakhul was that this relation exists when one number is a multiple of the other. For example, 1/6 and 1/3. And tawafuq was that, when the relation between numbers is neither tamathul nor tadakhul. However, they share a common factor, which is termed as wafq, and that's where the tawafuq comes from. And then the fourth relation was tabayun, when two numbers are so different and variant that they are multiplied, like one is multiplied with another in order to get the base number. And then from the categories that we went over, as we will mention that again today, we went over the first category, and under that we went over in details the cases for husband, what are their allotted share, and as well as the wife. And then we went over many Masa'ils relating to husband and wife and their distribution. And we also went over details of nikah fasid, invalid nikah, and how that affects the inheritance process as well. So inshallah, now we will begin our fifth dars. And today, inshallah, we will be covering, as we mentioned last week, the second category of the waratha. So as a reminder, we went over first category last week. We'll go over the second category today, but we will also try to cover the third if the time allowed us. And this is just, for refreshing our mind that the Dhawil Arham, the primary heirs, this is the best way to understand them. They're a total of 12, 4 males, 8 females. We went over the first category, as you can see on your far left. Spouse, we covered husband. They get husband get 1/2 in the absence of children, 1/4 in the presence of children. And then we went over the share of wife as well, 1/4 in the absence of children, 1/8 in the presence of children. And the details were all mentioned as well. Today, inshallah, we will go over the second category, parents, and we will go over father, halat for father, as well as mother, and some very important masails related to the parents as well, inshallah. So if you have not taken a picture of this or note it down, I would recommend that you do so, because inshallah, as we go further, this will, if we have this in our mind, the structure made, it helps us understand better as to where we're going and how the distribution process is following along. So the first male heir of the primary heir was mentioned last week. Inshallah, today we begin with second male heir of the primary heirs. And this is the from the previous slide as well, second category, parents. So inshallah, we'll begin with father. So father has 3 cases. Either a father will be under primary share, is what we're learning. So he will receive 1/6. When a mayyit, or when the deceased passes away and he leaves behind a father, the father will receive 1/6. Second halat, or second case for the father, is that he becomes residuary share. So he will receive residuary. He will become asaba and he will take it all. The third case is that he will be primary share. So he will receive 1/6 with the possibility of being a residuary share as well. So in some cases, the father will only receive 1/6. In some cases, the father will receive all. And in some cases, the father will receive 1/6 plus residuary, plus leftover. Remember, asaba gets the leftover if we get that far. So in some cases, the father will get 1/6 plus the leftover. And inshallah, when we go over the examples, inshallah, I will explain that better as how is that happening. And one thing to remember, so in the example, we will be going, the order might be a little bit back and forth. So the residuary share, this one, asaba, might be mentioned in the third one. So just follow along, inshallah, I'll explain over there. So when does the father get 1/6? So the father will get the primary share of 1/6 in the presence of a son or in the presence of a grandson. So if someone passes away, if a mayyit is there and he leaves behind a son and he leaves behind a father, so then in that case, the father will receive 1/6. Or the mayyit, the deceased, leaves behind a grandson and he leaves behind his own biological father. So in that case, the father will receive 1/6. The second hal, or the second case for the father, is that the father becomes residuary shareholder. So he takes everything entirely. And this is in the absence of son and grandson, daughter and granddaughter. So when there are no children left, by the deceased, then the father and his only father that is, remaining. So at that time, the father will receive the asaba and he will take everything. Inshallah, in the example, I'll explain further. The third case for the father is that, he will take primary share together with the possibility of residuary share. So, and that is in the presence of the daughter and the granddaughter and the absence of the son and grandson. It's easy to understand. So it's just when there's a son and grandson, the father will receive 1/6. When there's a daughter and granddaughter and no son and no grandson, then the father will receive 1/6 plus asaba, plus the remaining. And when there's no daughter, no granddaughter, no son, and no grandson, then the father will receive everything. He will just become asaba, residuary share, considering that there are no other rightful heirs. At that time, the father will be entitled to receive all of the estate. So this is for the first halat. So if a mayyit, let's say we're going to call mayyit Zayd. Let's say if Zayd passes away and he has a father that's alive and a son, he has a ibn, or he has ibnul ibn, a paternal grandson, then the father at that time will receive sudus. He will receive 1/6. And the dalil for that is وَلِيَبْوَيْهِ لِكُلِّ وَاحِدٍ مِّنْهُمَا السُّدُسُ مِمَّا تَرَكَ إِنْ كَانَ لَهُ وَلَدٌ. So in this ayah, the word walad refers to son or paternal grandson. Now, the example for that, let's say, look on this side. Let's say Zayd is the deceased. This is how we write out a masala, as we went over the last in the last week dars as well. So let's pretend Zayd passed away. Now, this is a mayyit. You draw out a line like this. You don't have to, but that's how we do it, to simplify things. And the alive heirs are these. So if father is there, now father will receive 1/6. Okay, so in the presence of son, we said, in the presence of son, the father will receive 1/6. As you can see, sudus, he's receiving 1/6. So total share are, being 6 shares. So the base number is 6 for us. He's receiving 1/6. And the son is becoming asaba binafsihi, which again, residuary heirs details, we are purposely not going over those right now because it will confuse us. So we'll go over, asaba and all of its aqsam, all of its types later on. But the point is, let's say Zayd passes away, he leaves behind a father and a son only, and there's no one else. In that case, in a perfect scenario, the father will receive 1/6 and the ibn will receive leftover. Therefore, he will get 5/6 of the entire estate, and the father will get 1/6 of the entire estate. Now, in this masala, again, in this example, let's say Zayd has passed away again, and he leaves behind this time father and ibnul ibn. He leaves behind grandson right here, paternal grandson. So it's identical, it's exact same equation. The father will receive 1/6 again because he's receiving sudus. And ibnul ibn, of course, the ibn doesn't exist. So when the son is not there, and here in this case, the grandson is there, the grandson will become asaba binafsihi once again. He will receive the leftover and therefore will get 5/6 of the entire estate, and the father will get 1/6 of the estate. Now, halat number 2, or the case number 2, was that if a mayyit, let's say Zayd, once again, he passes away, he has a father, and he leaves behind a daughter, or bintul ibn, or he leaves behind a paternal granddaughter or daughters. And in that case, we also mentioned, in the absence of sons, there was a condition that the daughter exists or granddaughter exists and no sons shall exist. In that case, the father will get fard mutlaq, which is basically, in other words, 1/6 plus asaba, plus the residuary share. So plus at-ta'sib, meaning he will become 1/6 of his rightful share, plus he will also become entitled to becoming asaba, residuary share, and he will receive the remaining portion after all of the distribution has taken place. So, and the dalil for that is وَلِيَبْوَيْهِ لِكُلِّ وَاحِدٍ مِّنْهُمَا السُّدُسُ مِمَّا تَرَكَ إِنْ كَانَ لَهُ وَلَدٌ. And فَإِن لَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ وَلَدٌ وَوَرِثَهُ أَبَوَاهُ فَلِأُمِّهِ الثُّلُث. Again, this was all the ayats that we mentioned, in Surah An-Nisa, relating to the ahkams of the waratha. So the dalails are coming from that. So to understand this, in the first part of the ayah, that in the case that there are children, the fixed portion 1/6 for the father has been mentioned if there is a son. And in the second part of the ayah, in the case that there are no children, فَإِن لَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ وَلَدٌ وَوَرِثَهُ أَبَوَاهُ فَلِأُمِّهِ الثُّلُث. Right here. Okay. So firstly, it is established that the parents, meaning the mother and the father, share the mirath. Then the ayah mentioned the portion of the mother only, while the portion of the father is left over. So technically, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala only mentions the share of the mother in case of no children, and therefore indirectly mentioning the leftover for the father. In the ayah, it is not mentioned the share for the father in case of no children, but Allah mentioning the share of the mother, indirectly mentioning the leftover is for the father. So thus indicating that the father gets the rest. Once again, here we will look at a practical example. Let's say Zayd passes away. As you can see here, Zayd passes away, and he leaves behind a father, and he leaves behind 2 daughters. Bintan means 2 daughters. Okay, so in this case, as you will see, the father is supposed to receive 1/6 plus asaba. So as you will see here, he's getting 1/6 here plus leftover. But for daughters, we didn't go over the halat yet, so it might get confusing for you guys. But know this, that they're getting 2/3. So if exists 1 daughter, they get half of the estate. 2 daughters, they get 2/3, as it is the case here. So they're getting thuluthan here. So the bintan, 2 daughters, are getting thuluthan, 2/3. So 2/3 of 6 is 4, and that's why they're getting 4/6. And father is receiving sudus plus asaba. So he's getting 1/6 because that's his primary share. And plus he's getting the remainder. So 4 plus 1 originally was supposed to be 5. And then there's a leftover, which is becoming the asaba right here. So he will, in that case, will receive 2/6. Another example you can look at is, let's say Zayd passes away again, and he leaves behind a father, and he leaves behind 1 daughter. So in this case, the daughter is supposed to receive nisf. So she gets 3/6, and the father was supposed to receive 1/6. So the father gets 1/6. As you can see here, he gets 1 sudus, and 3 plus 1 equals 4. So there was a remainder of 2/6. There he becomes asaba, he becomes the residuary shareholder. So he gets 1/6 plus 2 from the asaba aspect. So therefore the father will receive 3/6 and 1 daughter, will receive 3/6 as well of the entire estate. If I'm going too fast, I guess you can message me and then I can slow down. I can leave this up on the screen a little bit so you can understand how the distribution is happening. So another halat that we went over for the father was that if the father, if a mayyit passes away and he has a father and he has no son, he has no paternal grandson, he has no ibn al-ibn, he has no bint, he has no daughters, and he has no bintul ibn, then at that case, the father will get asaba only. Meaning, if he's the only recipient, then the father will get asaba and therefore will receive everything. As you can see here, Zayd passes away. He leaves behind only father. There's no one else. Then, in that case, the father becomes asaba bi nafsihi, and he will receive not 1/6. He will not receive 1/6 plus asaba, but in fact, he becomes asaba bi nafsihi, and therefore the masala, as you can see, is total share is made from 1. So the father will receive the entire estate. This is if the son dies and he leaves behind father, no children, no daughter, no son, no grandson, no granddaughter, only father, then in that case, the father will receive the entire estate. So the masla here is not made from 6, but in fact from 1. And in that case, the father receives everything. Now look at here. Let's say Zayd passes away. He leaves behind Ab and So he leaves behind father and mother. Now here, the father is becoming asaba bi nafsihi, and Allah says, فَإِن لَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ وَلَدٌ وَوَرِثَهُ أَبَوَاهُ فَلِأُمِّهِ الثُّلُثُ. So the mom will receive 1/3, as you will see here. So Zayd passes away. He leaves behind father and mother. There's no children for Zayd. In that case, the mother is entitled to receive 1/3, as you can see here. So the total masala is from 3. So here she will receive 1/3 of that 3. So she gets 1 share. And the father will become asaba bi nafsihi again, and he will receive 2/3. Hopefully this is making sense, inshallah, as we go along slowly. Now, the next masala to understand here again is, let's say Fatima passes away. She leaves behind husband, she leaves behind father, and she leaves behind her mother. Now, in that case, the zawj, we already went over last week, the case for husband. If there are no children, the husband receives nisf. The husband receives 1/2. As you can see here, the masala is from 6. Now the husband, will receive 1/2, will receive 3/6. The mom is going to receive thuluth ma baqiya, yani 1/3 of the remaining estate. So the remaining, after the share of the husband is taken away, the remaining that is left is right here, thuluth, 3, right? 2 plus 1 is 3. So 2 plus 1 here, so she gets 1/3 of the remainder, which is the 3 between these two. So she gets 1/3 of leftover, so she gets 1, and the father will receive 2/6. So 1/6 plus 2/6 plus 3/6 for the husband equals total share, which are 6, and the total masala is of 6. So a couple of important masa'il, inshallah, we will be going over as well. So again, as a reminder, asaba heir is one who receives whatever remains from the estate after primary heirs receive their allotted share. So once the primary heirs receive their share, then the second category that we move on to from amongst the type of heirs will be the asaba, or the residuary or secondary heirs. As as last week, we are going over some important masail again. So a man cannot inherit from his illegitimate child, even though he may be his biological father and vice versa. Why? Because in Islam, we have the concept of nasab. We have the concept of paternity. And that paternity is established through nikah. And if a son is considered illegitimate, that means there's a, absence of nikah there. And if the absence of nikah is there, therefore the wirasat or the paternity is not established. And if the paternity is not established, then he is uh, mahrum, or he won't be entitled to the respective share that he's supposed to receive. Another masala is if an unmarried woman, I know some of these masail might be too much for some families, but I felt it was important. So inshallah, we will be going over them because it is related to our lives and it's very important. So if an unmarried woman commits fornication and consequently gives birth, the lineage of that child would not be connected to the father as stated before. Again, so in order for the nasab to take place, there is a requirement of nikah. And if the nikah is not there and the act took place outside of nikah through fornication, then the lineage of that child would not be connected. Now, another masala is if an unmarried woman becomes pregnant for the person she fornicated with, thereafter marries him and gives birth to the child 6 months or more from the time of marriage, the child will be considered legitimate and paternity will be established and the child will be attributed to the husband, meaning the fornicator, meaning the man. So he would be not only the biological father, but his real father according to Sharia. I know for some it might be confusing here. Why is the mention of 6 months? Shar'an, this is the minimum time or the minimum duration of pregnancy that's considered. So if it is born 6 months, even the day, so from the date they marry and post that date, 6 months later, exactly 6 months later, if she gives birth to a child, or more than that, even 6 months and 1 day or more, then the child will be considered legitimate. There are many ahkamat, fiqh rules for that. I don't want to get into all that details, but this is 6 months is basically the bottom line to understand, as this is the earliest and uh, the minimum requirement for the pregnancy to be valid for that man. So if it is less than that, let's say if she gives birth to a child before 6 months is completed from the time of marriage, then that will be considered illegitimate again, because it would be assumed that the child was conceived before the time of marriage. So therefore, as a result, it would be considered illegitimate again. But if it is 6 months exactly or more from the time of marriage, then the child will be considered legitimate, and therefore the ahkam or the rulings of inheritance will be applicable between them. Another masala is that if after marrying the fornicator, if this man marries her, I mean this woman marries the fornicator man, and she gives birth before 6 months from the marriage, then the paternity of the child will not be established. Similarly, if she marries the fornicator after the birth of the child, so obviously it would be ruled that the child does not belong to this fornicator, as you know 6 months is what the Sharia has stipulated. It is the minimum requirement, and if that is not there, then it is ruled that the child was conceived before that. So these are a lot of technical points. It's just connected to it, so that's why we're going over it. Another masala is that if the unmarried woman fornicated and became pregnant, thereafter marries other than the fornicator, the paternity of the child will only be connected to the husband if the child is born after 6 months from the time of marriage, even though the marriage may not have been consummated. See, al-waladul farash, there's a lot of ahadith we find. There's a lot of rulings. The Sharia didn't just, stipulate 6 months. I'm sure, from the medical aspect, if you look at it as well, like a premature birth, there's a lot of aspect to understand from that as well. A full-term pregnancy versus the earliest a child can be born. So that's what, the minimum requirement is what the Sharia is, referring to here, the 6 months. So if it is born, you know, after 6 months or exactly at 6 month completion, then the child will be considered or will be attributed to the husband. Otherwise, the paternity between this child born and this husband will not be established. And another masala is that it is permissible for an unmarried woman who became pregnant to marry someone other than the fornicator, the man who impregnated her. However, the couple would refrain from the relation until the wife delivers the child. The permissibility of the nikah exists, but consummation of the marriage, this is a completely different masala. We went over something related to this masala that you know so to simplify this, if a person, if a pregnant woman marries somebody, it would be permissible to accept the nikah here, but it would not be permissible, to consummate the marriage with this husband, as I want to use a respective word here. It's the water that is in her raham. So the pregnancy that exists within her does not belong to this man. So therefore, as a result, it cannot be consummated with this second man, meaning her current husband right now. So consummation, would not be allowed of that marriage until she delivers the child. But the permissibility of the nikah is there. So we were going over the rules. We went over 2 rules, one for the husband and one for the wife, that both of them are never deprived, nor do they deprive anyone else. The third rule that we will go over is that the father is never deprived. However, he eliminates the following. If the father exists, remember, this is very important, because let's say tomorrow we're trying to solve our own family's, inheritance case. We need to be mindful of these factors. So if the father exists of the deceased, then the grandfather is eliminated, the paternal grandmother is eliminated, and siblings are also eliminated. Remember, siblings, not children, only siblings of the mayyit. Okay, so his full brothers, half brother, half sister, all of those, related to the deceased are all eliminated if the father exists. So this point is also very important to note down, because when we solve, inshallah, other a little bit difficult masail, it will be handy to remember these very important points. With that, we complete the case for the father. Inshallah, now we'll go over second female heir of the primary heirs, and which was, we already mentioned, we're going over the category, in that under father came mother. So the mother has 3 cases. Ignore these numbers. It's not 1 whole and 1/6 and 2 whole and 1/3 and 3 whole and 1/3. No, these are just for numbers. So the mother has 3 cases. She will receive 1/6, or she will receive 1/3, or she will receive 1/3 of the estate after deducting the spouse's share. So number 1, when will the mother receive 1/6? So the mother will receive 1/6 in the presence of any of the following. First one, children, son or daughter. If there are sons or daughter, the mother will receive 1/3. Paternal grandchildren. If son doesn't exist, and let's say, paternal grandson exists, even in that case, the mother will receive 1/6. 2 or more siblings from both parents or from either one, meaning full brothers, full sisters, or half brother, half sister. If two or more, exist, even in that case, the mother will receive 1/6. Now, second case for the mom is that she will receive 1/3 in the absence of all of the above. Remember, as you can see here, so both of them seem similar. So what is the difference? One is 1/3 of the entire estate, whereas, one is 1/3 of ma baqiya, or the leftover. We'll go over the details of that. So the third is 1/3 of whatever remains after deducting the spouse's share. So not 1/3 of the entire estate. Remember this, not 1/3 of the entire estate as you see here. So the under example, we'll go over how does that apply. So we kind of went over the example of Fatima in the back, slide. When Fatima passed away, she left behind Zoj, she left behind Ab and That kind of applies right here. So this occurs in case where only a spouse inherits with both parents in the condition that the mother is not partially deprived. So the mom will receive 1/3 of whatever remains after the share of the husband has been taken, or after in case of, the Zayd passing away, and let's say Fatima is there with both parents of Zayd, then after she receives her share, then in that case, the mother will receive 1/3 of whatever remains. So rule number 4 is the mother is never eliminated. However, she eliminates both the maternal and the paternal grandmothers. As you can see, the sequence here, that the closer the relative is, they are more entitled to receiving a share, and the higher and the further a relative is, they seem to be deprived or eliminated by the presence of the closest relative. So if the mother is there, then the grandmothers, both of them, paternal and maternal, both of them will be eliminated. Again, if the father is there, he eliminates the grandfather. If mother is there, she eliminates maternal and paternal grandmothers. Let's go over, a example to understand this better. So when a mayyit, he passes away and has a mother and has children or grandchildren, or when mayyit has a mother and 2 or more than 2 siblings. As you can see here, so if a mayyit has a mother, he has ibn, or paternal grandson ibnul ibn, or he has bint or bintul ibn, or he has many siblings, then the mother will get 1/6, as was mentioned on the previous slide as well. In that case, remember, if children exist, or grandchildren exist, or 2 or more siblings exist for the deceased, then in that case, the mother will get 1/6. She will receive sudus. And the same dalil applies from the father's share as well, that وَلِيَبْوَيْهِ لِكُلِّ وَاحِدٍ مِّنْهُمَا السُّدُسُ مِمَّا تَرَكَ إِنْ كَانَ لَهُ وَلَدٌ فَإِنْ كَانَ لَهُ إِخْوَةٌ فَلِأُمِّهِ السُّدُسُ. Now, let's say Zayd passes away. He leaves behind mother, and he leaves behind a son. Remember, we said here, if ibn exists, then the mom will get 1/6. So here, as you can see, the father is receiving the mother is receiving 1/6, similar, identical to the father, how back in under father halat, he was receiving 1/6 as well. So is receiving 1/6, and ibn is receiving leftover. So let's say in that perfect scenario, if it's just, Zayd passes away and he leaves behind only mother, and he leaves behind ibn. So these are from the primary heirs, the mom is getting it. And from asaba, from the residuary heirs, once we go over the detail, these Masa'il will make more sense, because we'll be going over them, something similar to that again and again. But inshallah, when we get to the asaba category altogether, then all of this will start to make more sense. But our aim right now is here to understand they're receiving 1/6. And, this is just to complete a masala, that's why it's mentioned. And, the ibn will receive leftover 5/6. Another masala to look at would be that Zayd passes away. He leaves behind mother, he leaves behind bintul ibn. Remember, bintul ibn is right here, exists. Okay, and he leaves behind uncle. Now this is also new, as you can see here, asaba binafsihi, all this we keep receiving asaba here. Inshallah, this is just, I'm adding it there just so we can get, familiarized with it. Inshallah, we'll go over them again. So mom here is receiving 1/6, so she gets 1/6, one share. Bintul ibn, okay, she's receiving, if it's 1, she's receiving 1/2. So she's receiving 3 shares from the 6. So she's receiving half of that. And what do we have? So 3 plus 1, 4. What we have a remainder is of 2. So uncle exists, and in this case, there are nobody else from primary heirs, and from asaba, we're having an uncle here in this case. So the uncle will receive leftover, and he will get 2/6. 2 plus 3 plus 1 equals 6. And as we can see here, 6 share. So the second hal, that, if there are neither children nor, multiple siblings. So if a mayyit has a mother, he has no son, no paternal grandson, no ibnul ibn, no bint, and no bintul ibn, and no multiple siblings. Then we said the mother will get thuluthul kul. She will get 1/3 of the total or the entire estate. We went over 2 types of 1/3. So this is the first one. She will get 1/3 of total, not 1/3 of what is left over. That is coming up in the next hal. فإن لم يكن له, again, the dalil for that is فإن لم يكن له ولد وورثه أبواه فلأمه الثلث. So if he or she does not have any children and his parents are his only heirs, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, then the mother gets 1/3 of the estate, the rest goes to the husband and father. As we can see here in this example, let's say Zayd passes away. Nothing against Zayd, it's just very common. Everybody, or this easiest misal to give is always Zayd for some reason. So we're just going with that. So Zayd passes away again. He has no children, remember, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says the mom will get 1/3 and the rest will go to the husband and father. In this case, the husband doesn't exist. Okay, so what's happening here? So Zayd is passing and he leaves behind mom and he leaves behind dad. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala stipulated here that the mom will get 1/3, as you will see here. So she gets 1 of the 3 shares. And the father here is becoming asaba binafsihi, and the father is getting 2/3. So, hal number 3 for the father. And 2 plus 1 equals 3. And that's how the estate will be distributed. If it's just the son passes away and leaves behind only a mom and dad, then the total estate will be divided into 3 shares. 1 share of the total will go to the mom. 2 shares of the total estate will go to the father. Now, this was the third halat for the mother. If there is a father and a spouse, okay? So if a mayyit, he leaves behind a mother, he leaves behind, again, no ibn, no ibnul ibn, no daughter, no bintul ibn, no multiple siblings. But he does leave behind, zawja, or she leaves behind a zawj, and the father also exists. Then at that case, the mother will get thuluthul baqi, 1/3 of leftover, after the share of the zawj or the zawja has been deducted. Whatever remains of the estate after the share of the zawja or the zawj has been deducted, the mother will get thuluthul baqi, will get 1/3 of the leftover. The previous hal will get 1/3 of the entire estate. As you can see here, we'll get thuluthul kul. But If there's a spouse involved as well, then in that case will be thuluthul baqi. Not to get confused with this, that's why I'm mentioning it again and again. As it's the same dalil, subhanallah, from one portion of the ayah. As you can see, so many, scenarios and so many types of masail can, be extracted. So here, as we will go over the example, the rest goes to the husband and father, whereas the mom will get a third. So now, a couple of notes to remember if you want to write these down as well. So this hal number 3 for mother will always exist with father and with spouse. Without spouse, it will be the previous hal, which means thuluthul kul, would not be thuluthul baqi. And note number 2 is if there were male or female children, then the mother will be of hal number 1, not hal number 3, meaning she will receive 1/6, not thuluthul baqi, not 1/3 of the leftover. That's what hal number 1 means, 1/6, as we went over the first case for mother, and not thuluthul baqi, which is right here, hal number 3. So these are just key points to remember as well. This masala we went over under the cases for father as well. Let's say Fatima passes away. She leaves behind her husband, she leaves behind her mother, and she leaves behind father. In that case, there are no children, so the husband receives nisf. We went over that last week. So total shares are 6 again, and 3 is what the Zawj will get. So 6 minus 3 is 3 right here. So once these 3 are taken away, we have total of 3 shares to work with right here. And we are saying that when there is a spouse and no children, mom and dad exist, then the mother will get thuluthul baqi when after the share of the zawja or zawj has been deducted. As we see here, Fatima leaves behind zawj, so we give a husband his allotted share, which is nisf, and we are left with 1/6 and 2/6. So the mom will get 1/3 of leftover. Remember, after this 3 has been subtracted from the 6, we have a leftover of only 3. We won't be taking 1/3 of this, but in fact of remaining. So she gets 1/3, very basic, but I'm mentioning it again and again just so we remember the point. And then the father will get the leftover as we see here. So again, 2 plus 1 plus 3, total 6, and that's where the masala is from, 6 shares. Now, let's look at another masala. Remember, these finding the base number or how the masala will be made, this we went over last week under how to determine a share. But as you can see here, the masala is made from 12 shares, not 6 shares anymore. Why? Because the rubu' is here, 1/4 is clashing with 1/3. Remember, we, in the recap of last dars, even the beginning of today, we said if from group 1, in group 1 it was nisf, as you can see here, clashing with 1/3, so the masala will be made from 6. Here we see 1/4, and we said that from group 1, which were 1/2, 1/4, and 1/8, if 1/4 clashes with 1/3 or 2/3 or 1/6, then the masala will be made from 12, as we can see here up top. The masala is made from 12. So in this case, Zayd passes away. He leaves behind his wife, he leaves behind mother, and he leaves behind father. So Zawja is getting 1/4, because last week we went over the cases of for the wife as well. In the absence of children, the wife is entitled to receive 1/4 of the entire estate. If there are children, then she is entitled to receive 1/8 instead of 1/4. So that's why we see that 1/4 here. She's receiving 1/4 because of the absence of children. So 1/4 of 12 is 3. That's why she gets 3 shares. Now, thuluthul baqi. Remember, we're going over thuluthul baqi. No children, so we're going over thuluthul baqi, 1/3 of leftover. So we have, when we subtract 3 from the 12, we are left with 9 shares. Now, 1/3 of leftover is 3. So 1/3 of 9, I should say, is 3, to understand it better. So the mom will receive thuluth ma baqiya, and she will receive 3 shares. Now we have a remainder of 6 shares because 3, 3 minus 12 and then 3 minus 12. Now we have a remainder of 6, and that goes to the father. Why? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in case of no children, then the mother gets a third, okay? And the rest goes to the husband and the father. So the rest here is going to the husband and the father. So in this case, the father here, husband, we already gave him, the zawja, we already gave her share. So 6 plus 3 plus 3 equals 12. And as we can see here, the masala is made from 12. Hopefully this is making, sense. Now, Masa'il relating to mother. We're not going to go over many of Masa'il. There were a lot of, Jadid Masa'il that I could mention, but, for the time being, we'll just go over one masala. That children born illegitimately to a woman who was not married will have no real father, and thus inheritance will only take place between child and the mother. So why? Because the nasab is not there. And when the nasab, the paternity was not there for this child, but so the father is excluded, but the relation exists between a mom and her child. So therefore, that will be honor, and the mom and the child, between them, the inheritance will take place, but the father will be, excluded from this. Another masala that we can go over is that children born illegitimately to a woman who is not married will have no real father, and thus it's similar to the first. Oh, actually, it's the same copied masala. So it will only take place between child and the mother, as I mentioned again. I think we have time, inshallah, to go over grandparents' halat as well. It's very similar and very easy. So inshallah, we will try to wrap that up as well. So the third category is grandparents. So paternal grandfather, Jad, father's father, and however high in the hierarchy, with the condition that there does not exist a female intermediary between him and the deceased. If such a connection exists between the mayyit and the grandfather, then that is referred to as jadd fasid, irregular grandfather, and will therefore belong to the third category, which is the wil arham. This exists if it is higher, like great grandfather, or father of that great grandfather, and however high. So that's where jadd fasid come in. If we're going to a proper grandfather, then this is not something to worry about. So the grandfather can only inherit in the absence of the father. Very important point. This is basically the fourth case for the grandfather. So the grandfather can only inherit in the absence of the father. If the father exists, we already mentioned the rule, the grandfather is eliminated. The grandfather will not receive his share. And the inheritance of the grandfather is identical to that of the father. So I want you to look at this to understand this. So grandfather has basically 4 halat. If you can see here, the first 3 are completely identical to the father. He receives 1/6, in the presence of son or grandson or how low soever, and again, no father. When no father is there, the grandfather will receive 1/6. Same thing was for the father. So the father will receive 1/6 with the children. Number 2 was the father will be 1/6 plus residuary. That's what we see here. So he will get 1/6 and the remainder. When the deceased leaves a daughter or son's daughter, so bint or bintul ibn, how low soever, and no father. Again, no father keeps mentioning because when the father exists, the grandfather is eliminated. And the third halat for the grandfather is that he will become only residue, meaning that if Zayd dies, he doesn't leave behind a father, and he also leaves no son, no daughter, no son's son, or no son's daughter, how low soever. Then in that case, the grandfather, just like the father was in that previous case for the father, he will become asaba, and he will take complete share or the remainder if there are other, inheritors existing. And if there aren't any, then the grandfather will take asaba, and he will take everything. And the fourth is basically very simple here, that he will be deprived when the deceased leaves a father. So when the father exists, the grandfather is eliminated. Simple as that. Otherwise, the first three cases for the grandfather is completely identical to that of father. So again, this rule, to simplify, the grandfather eliminates all siblings, full and half. However, he is eliminated by the father. So if the father exists, grandfather is eliminated. And grandfather eliminates all the siblings, full and half siblings of the deceased. So paternal grandmother and maternal grandmother. So daddy and nani. However high. See, however high, nowadays it's very rare to find that, that in between the closest relative has passed away and the distant one is alive. That's very rare. But if that is the case, then, the masala would be different. With the condition that there does not exist a jadd fasid, irregular grandfather between her and the deceased. So the grandmother, basically, to simplify, the grandmothers have one case. They will receive 1/6 in the presence of one grandmother, meaning she will receive the entire share. However, in the presence of more than one grandmother, they will jointly share 1/6, as it was the case for the wives as well. If there's one wife, in the absence of children, she will receive 1/4. In the presence of children, will receive 1/8. And if there are more than one wife, they will jointly share the share amongst them. So again, this would be another way to understand it easily. So the grandmother will get 1/6 when the deceased leaves one grandmother or two or more grandmothers of the same level, meaning not great grandmothers, higher than that, just normal grandmothers. If they're on the same level, they will receive 1/6. If there are two or more, they will still share 1/6. And simple for grandma, she will be deprived if the deceased leaves a mother, okay, or a father, or or a distant grandmother will deprive a a near grandmother will deprive a distant grandmother. So just a normal proper grandmother will deprive or eliminate a great grandmother. So the rule number 6 to remember, so there are a couple of rules here. So the grandmothers are eliminated by the mother, and the paternal grandmother specifically eliminated by the father. And rule number 7, those who are closer to the deceased will exclude those who are further away. Hence, a grandmother will exclude a great grandmother. This should, I guess, make more sense now. And the last rule for today is rule number 8. The paternal grandmother will be excluded in the presence of the father. Again, if the father exists, we already mentioned under father rule that if the father exists, he will eliminate the grandfather and the grandmother. So the paternal grandmother will be excluded in the presence of the father. I think, inshallah, with this, we will finish our dars today. Hada wa billahi tawfiq. And if you have any questions, as always, please email us at questions@gmail.com. And with this, we finish our 5th dars. And inshallah, next week, we will study the halat of daughters and sisters. So the 4th category and the 5th category from the chart that was shared in the beginning. and inshallah, the Masa'il again related to their respective scenarios. Jazakumullahu khair.